As our name suggests, we love all things road and racing. But where the two meet, that's where things get really interesting. Technology developed under competition conditions has been improving the performance, handling, safety, and even the economy of our daily drivers for decades. Sometimes the relationship between road and race is much closer, giving us some fearsome street machines. And before you enjoy some of our favourites, please do remember to like this video and subscribe if you want more. The Chrysler 426 Hemi of the mid-1960s is one of those engines, like Alfa Romeo's Busso V6, which is famous enough to have a one-word name recognition among enthusiasts. In fact, this wasn't the first time Chrysler had trialled hemispherical combustion chambers from which it gets its name. That was an experimental V16 aero engine at the tail end of World War II. This was followed by the first generation road car Hemi V8 in the 1950s, but the second generation is the one which created the legend. Chrysler had abandoned the technology in 1959, only to retrieve it 5 years later for competition use. NASCAR prohibited multi-valve engines, but by using Hemi cylinder heads, Chrysler was able to use significantly larger valves to improve high RPM breathing. Nicknamed the Elephant due to its size and power, just 11,000 426 Hemis, that's 7 litres, made it into street cars between 1964 and 1970. The first being the Plymouth Belvedere and its sister car, the Dodge Coronet. Detuned, the engines still made 425 horsepower and 470 pound-foot of torque, and are used in top fuel drag racing to this day. Admit it, this wasn't the car you were expecting. The Fiat Dino is the less well-known but prettier cousin to Ferrari's Dino 206 GT, and the car which allowed Ferrari to homologate its 2-litre V6 engine for Formula 2 racing. New FIA rules for the 1967 season required 500 engines to be built in less than a year, something tiny Ferrari was incapable of. So a deal was struck with Fiat for it to be used in a new Grand Tourer. It was called the Dino, the nickname of Enzo Ferrari's late son Alfredo, who was said to be the inspiration behind the Vittorio Jano designed engine. Aurelio Lampredi re-engineered it for road car use, and while Enzo Ferrari had envisioned the engine being built in Maranello for installation by Fiat, the Italian giant insisted on taking over production. This meant that all the engines had Fiat visible on the cylinder block casing, even the ones used in Ferrari's sports car. The engine in 2-litre and later 2.4-litre sizes was front-mounted in the Fiat Dino GT and Spyder, designed by Bertone and Pininfarina respectively, while in mid-mounted guise it powered Ferrari's Dino and, of course, the legendary Lancia Stratos. GM's answer to the runaway success of the Ford Mustang was the Chevrolet Camaro. Introduced in late 1966 and available in first-generation form until 1969. As with most of the pony and muscle cars of the era, there was a bewildering array of engine options available, from the straight sixes to the 4.9-litre V8 in the Z28 ready-to-race package. One thing GM wasn't prepared to offer in a car of the Camaro's size and weight was a big block V8. Frustrated by this corporate edict from on high, the Chevrolet division used the Central Office Production Order system intended for fleet and special vehicles to sneak a handful of 427CI equipped Camaros out of the factory in 1969. And this wasn't any big block. The ZL1 was an all-aluminium, hand-assembled V8 intended solely for drag racing and rated at 430 gross horsepower and 450 pound-foot. just 69 made it out of the factory door. As an option, it cost as much as the base model V8 Camaro alone. A pair of them somehow made it down under, where one took the Australian Touring Car Championship, later V8 Supercars, in 1971 and 1972. It's rare that concept cars become more extreme when they make it to production, but the Alfa Montreal is one example. When it debuted at Expo 67 held in Montreal, Canada, it lacked a name and was built on Giulia GT running gear, including its 1.6-litre inline 4. However, reaction to its Marcello Gandini pen body was so positive that Alfa Romeo readied it for production. Appearing at the 1970 Geneva Motor Show, the production car still used GTV underpinnings of double wishbone suspension up front and a live axle and limited slip differential at the rear, but under that supercar-style bonnet was a more appropriate V8. This was an enlarged version of the 2-litre V8 from the Tipo 33 Sports prototype, and incidentally, one of the most beautiful road cars of all time, the 33 Stradale. Displacing an extra half-litre but still dry-sumped and with mechanical fuel injection, it produced 200 horsepower. The Montreal was more expensive than a contemporary Porsche 911, perhaps in part due to its production process. The chassis was built at the Alfa Romeo Arese plant, before heading to one Bertone plant for the bodywork, then another for its paintwork and interior, and then finally returning to Alfa for the mechanicals to be fitted. Incidentally, the Montreal was never sold in Canada, because Alfa Romeo didn't want to develop the necessary North American emissions control equipment. Racing engine designs tend to have a limited lifespan because of the rapid pace of competition research and development. Jaguars, however, saw road car use for more than a quarter of a century, and, despite being originally intended for Le Mans, it was more than 15 years old before it made it to the Great Race. The engine's origins stretch back to the 1950s, when Jaguar engineer Claude Bailey proposed an 8-litre V12 to continue the firm's Lasarth success with the C-Type and D-Type. By the mid-60s, the engine was being tested in production trim in the Jaguar Mark X Saloon and 5-litre quad-cam all-aluminium competition form in the XJ13. While that project was canned, a single overhead cam 5.3-litre version was taken forward to production, first finding a home under the unmistakable bonnet of the Series 3 E-Type, putting it once again at the top of the performance pile. The engine saw duty in the XJ12, its sister car the Daimler 66, and the XJS, before finally achieving victory at Le Mans in the 1988 XJR9. As it has evolved into the techno saloon we know today, the BMW M5 has used almost every one of what enthusiasts would regard as a performance engine configuration, including V10s and both naturally aspirated and forced induction V8s. However, the original straight 6 is the one we're interested in here, specifically the M88/3, as it was based directly on the M49 racing engine used in the 3-litre CSL Batmobile, which took 6 European Touring Car Championships and a class win at Le Mans in the 1970s. The first variant, the M88/1, was fitted to the original BMW M1. Dry-sumped and with a 4-valve head and Kugelfischer fuel injection, it produced 277 horsepower and 239 pounds-foot. In its ultimate turbocharged incarnation, the M88/2 in the 3.5-litre CSL produced 900 horsepower for Group 5 competition, winning 3 rounds of the 1976 World Championship for makes. In comparison, the 286 horsepower of the original BMW M5 seems tame, but it was the fastest production saloon car in the world on its debut. blazing a trail for today's four-door supercars, and remains one of the rarest BMW motorsport models. It's fair to say that the Ferrari F50 didn't receive the adulation of either its predecessor, the F40, or its successor, the Enzo, in the Maranello Marque's pantheon of anniversary models. The main objection that armchair critics raised were the styling, but come on, it was the mid-90s. Everything was blobby. We're lucky it was still red rather than teal. However, in spirit, the F50 was much closer to Enzo Ferrari's ethos of win on Sunday, sell on Monday than its predecessor, which was more of a marketing exercise. The F50 genuinely took Ferrari's F1 technology and applied it to the road. From the carbon fibre tub and horizontally mounted suspension components to the 4.7-litre V12, this was as close as you could get to a contemporary Ferrari F1 experience. That engine really was a development of the V12 which won Alain Prost and Nigel Mansell's 6 Grand Prix in 1990, and in 1993 powered the Ferrari 333 SP sports car. It was at the very pinnacle of engineering for its day, with 5 valves per cylinder, dual chain-driven overhead cams and dry sump lubrication. Good for 513 brake horsepower and 347 pound-foot, enough to eclipse the F40's 0 to 60 mph time by half a second. I am sure most people were expecting to see the exalted Porsche Carrera GT here, but its V10, designed for a shelved footwork F1 car, never saw action. The 4.6-litre V8 in the Porsche 918 Spyder, however, shared its architecture with that of the engine in the Porsche RS Spyder. Created in conjunction with Penske, the RS Spyder was Porsche's first return to top-flight sports prototype racing since 1999. It won its class on its debut outing at Laguna Seca at the tail end of the 2005 season. It then took the American Le Mans Series LMP2 Championship in 2006, 7 and 8, Le Mans class victories in 2008 and 2009, and outright victory at the 2008 12 Hours of Sebring. A pretty good starting point, really. Porsche, being Porsche, its engineers didn't just up the 3.4-litre V8's capacity, it also gave the car some serious techno cred. The engine's 599 horsepower is supplemented by a pair of electric motors, one on each axle, delivering an additional 282 horsepower and a total torque figure just shy of 1,000 pounds-foot. Utilising Porsche's PDK dual-clutch gearbox, the Porsche recorded 0 to 60 times in the sub 2.5 second range, a top speed near 220 miles per hour, and could travel 20 miles on battery power alone. Let us know in the comments below what your favourite racing-derived road cars are.